Let's see. Yeah, it's like computers like, what?
It might be more efficient to just share your as through Teams, OJ.
Okay.
We've
Yeah,
tried
I
that.
want to do that.
Yeah, we've tried that in other classes. One of the things that happens is all the audio pops on for some reason. Like,
Oh,
it's kind of a terrorizing kind of thing. And then so everybody has to go and turn off the audio in Miro. So
Give me like 1 minute to dig it up, then, and then I'll share my
Sure.
screen in Teams.
yeah, that might be the more efficient.
I also find when I share my desktop in Teams, if I share it as general desktop instead of a specific link, it works better because the computer has a really hard time if you select a certain window that you want to show. But if you just show the general desktop, it doesn't freak out as much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
thanks for that pointer. Yeah.
Here we go. Let me know, everybody, if we can see this. You should be able to see it now.
Boom.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's talk about this. Amend. So we're going to call this amend. This is the This is the assignment where we're going to ask you guys to kind of come full circle with your writing of your manifesto, your visualization, your diagrams, and now circling back to the code to amend the code. Formalize it in written words so that this becomes the new law of the land. Okay. So you made your proclamations, your rejections, which may or may not be finalized. Your visualization of new architecture with your collages. It's now time to formally implement your manifesto. So you are familiar with how zoning codes determine how our cities grow, for better or for worse. You'll have your chance to amend it. So amend, as in verb, make minor changes in a text in order to make it fair, more accurate, or probably most importantly, up to date. Okay. That's one of the things about the codes is, especially zoning, is I don't think they can keep up with what's in demand, especially housing. So this is, you're updating the zoning. Second definition, modify formally as a legal document, legislative bill. And third, make better, improve. So we're going to be doing all of these, right? So just a simple step-by-step how you could approach, how we want to see you approach this amendment to the zoning code. Still trying to keep it a little bit loose, but one, you're going to choose. Am I getting that? Yeah, I'm getting the flicker again. Sorry, guys.
Do you have two screens, OJ, or just one?
I think that fixed it. That fixed it, right? It's not flickering. Okay.
It looks good.
Yeah.
So number one, choose an existing base zone to amend. Example would be residential, likely, and most of you. But if you're in a commercial zone or open space, some of you are in open space, likely most of these will be in Chapter 13 of City of San Diego. Some of you are in different cities. Choose the appropriate zone that you're in. And you will be introducing a new designator. So if you don't know what a designator is, that is the actual numeric or alphabetic abbreviation or acronym of the zone. For example, a new one, I guess an example would be RM Unlimited. I just made these up, by the way. Residential multifamily unlimited, open residential, res max, mixed layer. So you come up with an appropriate designator that talks about your new amendment or your new zone. Number three, modify the big five, what we're calling the big five. So you're looking for FAR. How are you going to modify the floor area ratio? How are you going to adjust the density? How are you going to set the height limit? How are you going to modify the setbacks? if at all, or change them. And E would be coverage. How are you going to change the coverage? Okay. Number 4, introduce new allowable uses if necessary. So if you're limited on allowable uses in your zone, here's your chance to introduce new uses. Okay. 5, specifics. This is kind of the fun one for me. This is if for those of you that have dug into some of the zones, you'll see that if you kind of get into the weeds of the zone, there's very specific prescriptions, right? So does your scheme require specific considerations? Example would be the offsetting planes, 45-degree envelope, entrance locations. So try to write a few specifics about your zones utilizing these sort of form prescriptions, okay? Just off the top of my head, I know there's one that if you kind of dig into the weeds of the parking regulations, there's some that like won't allow you to park a RV in your driveway. So they can be kind of quirky, but if you think about it, they make sense. So if you have any sort of super specific ways you want to, elements you want to add, this would be number 5, specifics. And 6, diagrams. So diagrams or using the language of the zoning code, figures. So all these types of diagrams are usually referred to as figures in the code or the zoning code, if you've noticed that. Supplement your new code section with one simple diagram or figure in some format of existing code example. This example is from the Portland residential zoning. And this just shows, again, these drawings are so dumb and simple. This would sort of illustrate one of your, big 5 or your specifics in a diagrammatic way, okay? So the deliverable, this would be a written draft of your zoning amendment with one of these figures, okay? And the way we want you to write this is just copy or mimic or continue the way the code is written, the way the zoning section is written. And again, if we have to look at this as a group, we can, but it's written in sort of like that outline format. So you always know where you're at in the zone or the section because it's listed by chapter, by section. I think Philip covered that. And it's always in the lower right-hand corner, lower or upper left, can't remember, of that page. So go back and sort of review how it's written and just mimic it. Some of these could also be introduced as a chart. So some of these items such as FAR, density, height limit, setbacks, those are all sort of listed as in a chart, right? But some of your guys' big 5 are listed in paragraph form or outline form. I don't think we care too much as long as it sort of mimics that existing code. Let me see here, and that's it. So when you're going through this, and you kind of want to look at all your work that you've done so far, right? You want to look at your manifesto. You want to look at your proclamations. You want to look at your collages. You want to look at your diagrams you just did, and with all that sort of backdrop, you should be able to propose modifications to your base zone, or create a new base zone. All right, and that is the amend assignment. So other instructors can jump in as to when this first draft would be due. I don't think we've set a date yet. But that's the description of this assignment. That's all I have here, guys.
Yeah.
And I think Philip, if we go back to Miro, Philip has added some more images of the zoning examples, right, Philip?
Yeah. So if I don't know if can I claim the screen? Can I?
Yeah, take it back. How do I just give it up? Stop sharing? Let's see.
Yeah. And I'm gonna. Cool. Thanks, OJ.
Yep.
I picked Does everyone see my Miro? Or no?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yes.
And this is sort of related to the mimicking of both the language and the diagram or the graphic standards of this, and that is, I included some examples that I think you want to riff off of. And I think the zoning designator, I think, is a particularly great one. So if I just took one out of the RS1 or the RS zone, and these at least to me they're both entertaining but also telling, and that is zoning designators like helicopter landing facilities, massage establishments, mobile food trucks, right? Like nightclubs and bars in sizes, right? Parking facilities as a primary use. So it's almost the attempt to cover everything, right?
Push
So it
carts.
gets really specific. But I think this will be, at least I view this as a creative writing exercise that is looking at your initial draft of your manifesto as a way of codifying it and put it into code and say, like, the new zone that we're proposing will permit certain uses, or you have to think of it. If you can't designate any use, you can imagine that anyone building on it would say, well, it's not in the code. I guess I get to do this, right? So there's always two sides of the argument, but I would ask every team to kind of mimic the format of this and the language of it, even to the kind of graphic styles of this. This to me is like the gold nugget right here of like a diagram that depicts, I don't know, like I can't unpack this. I mean, because like in terms of building, like I think that the question always remained, is it 50% of like what this plane is, right? How you do the calculations alone. But I think this is such a fantastic little, like, someone took a serious stab at this and had a kind of agenda with the offsetting planes of the minimum setback versus maximum setback, or the standard setback, sorry. And then how to like put this in a kind of legible form, and you can imagine like the language associated with it. So some of what you feel strong about, I think as a team, you could tackle any of these. It could also be, if you go for big buildings, for example, you're going to have to address consolidated lots to begin with, and what that means. I think this is a particularly fruitful one. I think, thinking of our projects. This is a beautiful one. Primarily, I think, and OJ has so much more to say about this, primarily because it sort of works off of the height limits. And we did this diagram with you guys at, the 2430, and that's this right here, except if you think of this little bump at a maximum of 6 feet, the dormer, that's an architectural element that allows you to actually break that plane and produce this. So I'd encourage everyone to kind of read into what the dormer, what the limits are of the dormer, what it means in terms of spatial height, and how does it not trigger phantom floors, for example. The other, this makes suburbia. It's in the code. Here, this is the language of every suburban track. Enclosed habitable area, parking entry driveway with the minimum of 5-foot setback. There was a formal agenda associated with this. You can't have your parking plane in the same line as the front of the house. for some reason. Okay, so these are fantastic. This explains the project of Suburbia. And the other, I think so. I guess this is another diagram that kind of talks about the permitted use. I would say every one that designates a new or the big five is going to make an amendment, add a chart to this or a piece that looks like this, I would say. And you have to be able to address this, right? So density is here, and that's square feet per dwelling unit. Minimum lot sizes, right? Like minimum lot dimensions, and all the way down to the setbacks. And this is, I think, where you're going to have, I would imagine, lots of fun, and that is like maximum floor area ratio, right? So add your number here. But I would say you want to be able to kind of back it up to know if you just throw in, rather than 7.2, if it's a 13.5, what that actually means. Yeah. And all these applied parts, I think these are fantastic to consider. So maybe those are, maybe I have a particular bias. I think everyone needs to address one of these. Everyone should be able to do one of these. Use maybe standards of this graphic language, or the way it's sort of demonstrated. These are graphic samples associated with language, and just sort of this stuff right here.
Yeah. Yeah, let me kind of just summarize or jump in again. So these are the really sort of the elemental or critical
you tell me
pages.
where you need to zone into, because I'm sharing the screen.
This is, I can just talk off. This is just leave it here, and I'll say pan writer. I think
okay.
So these ones that Philip picked are they kind of cover the basis of the of what I was talking about in the amend document, and that it hits the uses in that order, pretty much. Hits uses, proposed uses, then the sheet or the page to the right, if you want to pan Philip. Pick. This could be kind of hard to decide which diagram you want to illustrate or which figure you want to create, right? So what I would say is look at your latest works. Is there any, there's going to be like crazy contrast between what's existing and what you've sort of overlaid and looked at. Does your diagram speak to you anyway, or is there some strong language in your proclamation that would really obviously affect one of these concepts of these diagrams? And if you can't see it at first from your proclamations or your diagramming, skim through the section again and look at some of the ways that these envelopes are being controlled or dictated, and maybe that will sort of help you pick one of these drawings you want to sort of illustrate that. It's got to kind of work with your total package, your total proclamation, your total, what you're trying to do with your visualizations also. It's not supposed to be a hard drawing or a diagram. It's just a simple little, these figures are so simple and dumb, but they're so, they control so much. And then lastly, if you pan to the right, Philip, it's a great place to start on these charts. Just going, and this would be a fun place, like Philip was saying, to add your new zoning designator and even add a new column and just start filling it in like a spreadsheet almost, and trying to keep. I think the successful ones riffs off everything you see here. So from the font, does that we want this to look like we just took it out of the municipal code, and this is the new zone that you wrote. Mm-hmm. Right? And this is the zone that we're all, like, architects in the city are going to have to look at the zone and follow your code. So it's pretty a powerful thing if you think about it. You'd be able to, I'm sure a lot of architects would love to be able to do this. It's kind of look at these 5 sheets that Philip has posted, because these are the ones. It might sound daunting to have to amend the entire code, but we're not asking to.
No.
Very, very specific sheets, very specific topics, and the ones he's shown here hit them exactly. So.
I mean, look at this, like push carts and private property.
Yeah, there's almost like it's almost like you don't have to invent much. It's almost like there's plenty already in there that it just isn't being, it's just it's so excluded from residential right now. But there's plenty of ideas contained in the zone, ironically enough, in the code. Yeah.
Yeah, I would be curious to see how you guys. I think I'm looking at the diagram here as this interesting kind of where you guys take this with the diagram, and sort of how I would be looking to see how your diagram highlights your all of your work, your proclamations. And it can be a small intervention, actually. It can be about taking over a front yard. It can be about taking over a sidewalk. It can be about this offsetting plane or this or that, right? But it really drives how the built environment gets built. Anybody else? You guys?
I would wonder if you guys know, OJ, if you know, where did this stuff come from? How does, I mean,
I know how it works.
Does it come from a historical like research on like the village or some certain kind of ancient Greco typologies, or is it how is this determined?
I think it's layers and layers of planning committees. It rarely lacks one vision. It's just amendment. It actually is just that's how this is written. It's just a series of amendments and layers and layers of revisions and amendments, and these sort of step backs and envelopes. A lot of it comes from city planners, groups. I know when you get to specific community plans, some of these actual zones are commissioned to bigger architectural firms. Like I know Rob Quigley's got to do a few of these in certain neighborhoods. Again, some of the big firms have also had their hands in the cookie jar for doing some of these smaller community plan zoning ideas, concepts. But I don't know of one single source or reference to how it gets to where it is right now.
Are there community factions that contribute to the conversation? Or is it?
I would like to think so. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's definitely political ones, but as far like just to be specific on this image we're looking at, like the setback or the offsetting planes thing. Mm-hmm. You know what? I just think they're so outdated, and a lot of the times what they try to do is they try to prevent that rogue developer or builder from just plopping down the big chunk of building. And so it's their hand at saying, no, you've got to create a variety in your facade. You've got to create interest. You've got to create shadows. You've got, and who says that? I don't know.
Yeah. Because that's so like counter to European, like the Barcelona block, which is just a freaking sheer wall on the exterior and in the courtyards on the interior, the opposition to the flat surface, for example, where I'm just is it research based? Is it it's an aesthetic, it's an assault on the aesthetics. No, it's an aesthetic assault.
I mean, but I have I have a more cynical take on this, and that is, I think it's in my opinion, it's more driven by a phobia of you're writing code so you don't get certain things that you're afraid of or you don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's and I think historically, I think we there are instances where when was it when capitals and nations in a way all kind of said, or countries establish a particular preference for their architectural style, let's say, of their capitals, right? So
Mhm.
the US fell into the neoclassical, right? They said, okay, we're going to adopt the neoclassical architecture as a signature, both for a new nation. We're going to move, and every public or government related building needs to kind of conform to some of those principles, right? And I think there's something established in that. And then you have a series of lobbying efforts by, let's say, the new urbanists, for example. The new urbanists have a very strong take on, let's say, what makes a civil society work. And they have almost like a form-based catalog of things that need to take place in order for a city to work and for people to function. So these are multi-layered kind of I would say these are lobbying efforts. These
Yeah.
are they're infused by ideologues. They're hammering away of the fear of the modern. We need to go back to the village. It's these notions of progress is inherently dangerous, and if we don't control this, we're all doomed. So
Yeah,
I actually think there's a kind of language in this that is actually fairly dark, in my opinion. But that's just my cynical take, and I know we have Mike Stepner on the faculty that is far more steeped in all of this.
Yeah.
And I understand his ambitions, or like his commitment to this. But he had his fingers in a lot of these. But I the respect I give to the ones that are actually committed to developing this type of language and drawings. I mean, I do have respect for that, because I think they're completely committed and convinced that this will produce a better city. It will be safer. We don't have crime anymore. We do, it's that language. So fear is a main driver, and that's my take.
From my experience too, that there's always we haven't really hit on variances or anything like that. Someone that wanted to be creative in this writing could also propose variance. What a variance is just something that is proposed that maybe doesn't conform to these rules by a certain percentage. So if you were at, or if you had good logic why you wanted your building to be 35 feet, well, height's a tough one, but setbacks usually are negotiable sometimes within the zoning code. If you have an unusual situation with your lot, and there's a lot of them in San Diego, trust me, it's not unheard of to propose something that deviates from the zoning code. So these become negotiable.
If you know if you make a compelling case for it, right?
So on my prod, I had to go to the top of the zoning plan checker one time, and sat down, and I basically I created my own diagrams, and I was talking to him about my interpretation of the offsetting planes, and we were able to come to a compromise on what what I thought the diagram was saying and what he thought it was saying, and we were able to come to sort of a medium conclusion of what it will look, not like deviating dramatically from the intent, but some of these can be interpreted a little differently.
Yeah, and that's what we're kind of. So we're kind of practicing that here in a way, right? In a certain kind of way. Yeah.
I mean, maybe it just dawned on me now. You could also view this as a document. This is a somewhat like a prescription or a type of manifesto for a city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it
is.
really is. It's a script. It's a, it's a code.
It's a code.
Coders, we programmers write code, right? They write code that generates the program, This is a code that generates the city, or whatever, or non-city, or whatever we want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, I don't want to come across that I'm absolutely against this. I actually think there's tremendous amount of value in this, primarily because it's it's put on paper and it makes things clearer in most cases, right? Mm-hmm. It's usually the hotly contested ones where you feel like, I don't know how we're going to do this, right? Like, or what's the point of it? I think if you don't understand the ambitions, then it's really tricky to like work around. Some would argue the issues of setbacks are primarily like we'll never get to density, primarily because we're like setbacks. We won't get to a dense architecture if we continue to have setbacks.
Right.
At least on 4 sides. Why do we need setbacks on 4 sides? You can't make the Barcelona block.
No.
Yeah.
It's impossible because you got setbacks.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention and I don't want to open up this can so soon, but I think a studio could be dedicated now to, in this time period right now, where every argument in favor of sprawl is now being validated because of this current situation. Like now we're even up against a new kind of like force, because the argument against of course, yes, the very circumstances of sprawl has created the factors that have led to, of course, the kind of calamity that we're experiencing. So that's led to it. But at the same time, now if we don't make that connection, then we're going to see the commons really making a connection between the news they hear about New York City and public transportation and high density living. They're going to make that connection to highly contagious, dangerous environments.
Yeah, that's the new ammunition for them.
Yeah, that's the easy. So to me, the real opening in terms of like an architectural studio is there, because it's like, how through architecture, how do you generate density with now the new variable, right? Is social distance, is this idea of buffers, 6-foot buffers, I think that's where we're, right now, if we look at it, the current code, well, hey, the city, they're like, hey, perfect, we're set up, we've got our setbacks, we've got our padding, so it adds urgency. I don't want to mix it in necessarily here, because it's like, gosh, we're so far down the road. I don't know but I do, that to me is such a kind of, that would be such a big research topic now, or a great kind of provocation, is how do you achieve density? Because we know density has there's a high degree of responsibility within density. It's a highly responsible act, right?
It's the most efficient way of utilizing infrastructure.
Yeah.
It wins on every metric if you measure, from natural resources all the way down to like the heating and electricity bill.
So in a way, yeah, go ahead, OJ. Sorry, go ahead.
I would almost push back a little bit on the 6-foot COVID, phenomenon that's happening, and look at other, this is a can of worms, right? South Korea, the most successful at dealing with it, right? You can't tell me they're not dense either. Like, so yeah. But then you got, obviously New York, Manhattan.
Yeah, there's a lot of politics of prevention and planning, I think, that are at play, that the United States is trying to cover up, and I think that this is going to be a good cover up. Is
Yeah.
yes, yeah, our zoning. We need to do this. That's what was
Well,
wrong.
you've got a
right?
lot of, I mean, it's already starting from what I hear. There's a lot of NIMBYs in North County right now pointing to density, and they're already starting to use it as ammunition for anti-density. They're already starting with this COVID.
Yeah. It's inevitable. It's totally inevitable. So the rebuttal, if it's not going to be a policy one, right? I mean, if we say, well, and just right, if it's not going to be a policy one, which we're not going to see it. According to the leadership of the United States, the virus is. We're more concerned about the policy. Anything related to the policy of the virus is over. Like, we're now opening the economy, right? Like, that's the intention. So if it's not going to be policy, then can architecture enter? I mean, I'm just curious about that question. Is how can architecture? I don't know if it's actually helpful to answer that question, but what architectural strategies can be employed to ensure density, which is, but then also retain a certain degree of, safety with regards to these kind of things.
Well, I think here's like a more optimistic view, I suppose, is that the root of these zoning codes is based on public health and safety, primarily, right, with light, air, and fire, right? The fire separations, specifically in Chicago and New York, right? Kind of that's what created this. But I think this is the funny thing, is that there's always an exception to these codes. It doesn't matter how strict the code is. Even super strict fire codes can be negated by it being a historic building, and they don't want to alter that building, right? So it's kind of ironic in a sense that not every building is up to code like we would prefer it to be. In fact, there's probably so many variances that we just don't understand, but we're kind of in this state of mind that everything is safe because we have these codes. So I think it's important to understand that these can always be altered, right? And I think that that's where this assignment comes in. Is like, if you make a compelling argument, that's where the amendment comes in, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that speaks of the kind of workflow that we're suggesting here. It's a living document.
Yeah.
Any article in here is up for grabs, right? Like, it's more a matter of what are you going to argue for, right? What will be an initiative that will overturn an existing article?
Exactly. And then, can we give it to the city? Can we hand it over to the city?
This would be amazing.
It would make a really rad presentation to the city, I got to say.
I think so. I think that'd be something to shoot for, honestly. If we can get some students, it's that are passionate enough to pitch it, that would be really. I think that'd be a very, regardless if it was effective or not, I think it would be kind of a great moment in San Diego history. I'm sure it's been done before. I'm sure it's been done before. But
I'm putting this down. Mike Stepner is going to join our review on this one.
Oh my gosh!
God,
this is going to blow his lid off.
He'll blow our lids off.
He'll blow it.
Or put our lids back on, more so.
Yeah, put a lid on us.
So I'm gonna stop sharing it, but I think these are productive or discussions, at least from this end. So I know this wasn't exactly planned, but we're discussing perhaps in more detail a way of thinking about the current assignment of amend. I'd encourage every team to work together at developing a strategy on how you want to take on the municipal code, the amendment as it relates to your manifesto, things that you collectively embrace. So it's maybe more of a kind of focused investigation that you really want to drill in on let's say FAR, or someone to really take on the issues of just setbacks as it relates to your project. So I think it might be too overwhelming to say I can address all of them equally. I think you would want to just get to the ones where you feel that this will make a huge difference. But I think the writing of the base zone should be the starting point as a kind of development of a draft. And permitted use. I think make sure you read through all or as many zones at all the different items they actually check. It's a couple hundred. And I don't know what the building type that you're proposing, where that falls.
Do you guys have any? Do we have any questions or any questions from the students here at this point?
Is any of this helpful?
Yes, I think we just need to get started. Any questions will soon come up.
So I think the usual pattern should remain, and that will be we're launching a new project. So we're expecting progress work to be reviewed and discussed on Monday. And then, yeah, I guess that we don't have a due date. How about we post it on Miro? I think I feel better if we as a faculty just discuss that and communicate that in a kind of comprehensive way. But for now, I would say work together between now and Monday of developing a kind of draft and an approach for it. Have an idea about it, have initial sketches about it, and then we can review that. By then, I'd say no later than this evening, we should know when we want to shoot for this. I hope that's fair.
This is still part of a group project, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll soon break into an individual, so it's coming. Yeah.
Philip, I have a question about the submittal for today and actually submitting it. Will it be just through Miro, or do you want every individual file to be submitted into the folders on Teams?
I think that's a really good question. Personally, I think I'm okay if we leave it in Miro, and I could grab all the work from my section. But I would say as a team, just leave it where it is. How about what do you guys think? Tony, OJ, Don, any other?
For me, I would prefer that they leave it where it's at, but also put it in their folder, the submittal folders.
Oh, okay, of their individual work.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because we need to also know the group and the individual. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So I stand corrected. Yeah, if in the submittal folder, week 5, your name, and you leave the copy of your work, but don't take it off of Miro.
No.
Yeah. Some of these diagrams are too pretty not to get the full resolution. So yeah, definitely upload it to your individual file.
This is a great opportunity to try InDesign, guys. If you want to consolidate these images into one file, how do you do it? Like InDesign is a perfect place to do that. So if you want to put these all on a single sheet, like a 24 by 36 or something, and lay them out in a grid, or 36 by 24, then go for it. It'll consolidate your presentation to not a bunch of individual files, but into just a single PDF. So We'll take it however it is. We realize maybe not everybody knows how to do InDesign, and maybe that would be a good. We did. That's not true. I mean, we did InDesign. We did InDesign templates last quarter. Build yourself a little template, and maybe that would be the requirement. Is maybe not do today, but soon get it into a single. We have it here. We have it on Miro, but for Monday, to make sure we have it consolidated into a single single image, right, with all of them on as a grid on the grid.
Yeah. This is good because this kind of goes full circle back to our conversation of software, and I think that this using InDesign, it's fine whatever you use. Like if it's PowerPoint, it serves a purpose, right? But the Adobe suite, the reason InDesign is so powerful is because you can be utilizing your Illustrator and Photoshop files up until the very last second because they're live in the InDesign file, right? So whatever you're working on can quickly be relinked back into the presentation and then printed, right? Which I know you can do that in PowerPoint as well, but those softwares just are much more compatible. So I think it's important that you all are kind of working in that full circle, like Rhino, Illustrator, Photoshop, and it ends up in InDesign, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, are we ready to call this a day, or do we have any other anything else to tackle, or any other questions from the students?
I have a quick question. Where's the project handout? Where is that located? Is that on Teams or in Miro or somewhere?
The new one?
The document?
Yeah, it elaborates on the handout. It's the handout for the assignment.
OJ's? Yeah, OJ. Yeah.
I think it lives on Miro right now. I've also uploaded it to general. Let's see.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's in the files in general, like in our studio.
Yeah.
Files. Yeah.
Thank you guys.
It's just the amend is documented is in files under general, but also the ones that Philip posted underneath on Miro, the Miro board, those are also important too. Those are not in the files folder.
But I can put it there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
let's get it in there. Yeah, that'd be
I got that as a little PDF, so.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a quick question.
Yes, Brandon.
Just could you be a little more precise on how you want us to get the 5B Redux to you?
You're talking about the
assignment we did today, yeah, because there were 3 or 4 ideas floated. No, so this is how we want it turned in.
Once I didn't realize. I apologize for the lack of clarity. I didn't realize that I forgot that we know InDesign. So collectively, I don't know if I think we agree that let's just consolidate, Brandon, and for everybody, your grid of your 4 examples by 4 by what was it? 4 by 5, 4 by 5. Get those, build a page, and I don't have a preference in terms of page size. Maybe it is a 36 by 24 or a A4. I don't know. I think each one of your panels was A4. So I don't have a preference in terms of the actual page size here. But I think the goal would be to just consolidate all of the panels onto a single document in InDesign, and then just export that as a high quality PDF. and then upload that into the upload section for your under your name in the Teams general files section. Does that sound right, everybody? I mean,
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments or so? I guess we can terminate the call, but if there are any questions beyond this point, use the chat channels. We'll be able to respond for the next I'd say like half hour, 45 minutes. And I encourage everyone to maybe just quickly check in with your team members, hash out your approach on how to tackle this, and go from there.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay. Hey, thanks again, guys, for the great
Yeah.
work, the great push this week.
Yeah,
Really,
looks
really,
great.
yeah. Thanks again for those drawings.
Looks good, guys.
Yeah.
So we'll see you next week. Okay.
See ya.
All right, thank you.
Signing off.
Thank you.
All right. See you, everyone.
See you.